Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the two best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Happy Friday. I'm Craig Mish with you here on the show. We got a lot to cover on today's program. Some great guests as well. We'll check in with Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report, latest in the NBA. Some college hoops. We got spring training action getting ready to start around 1 o'clock Eastern. So the latest in Major League Baseball, Grapefruit League, and then Cactus League later today. Big weekend, as we mentioned, in the NHL. All kinds of hoops as well. Simon Applebaum will be with us from the podcast tomorrow. Will be televised. We'll go over the latest ratings. In fact, update you on the Four Nations tournament, how that looked for the National Hockey League as well, and the latest sports betting news as we start off the show here on this Friday ahead of the weekend. And we start with the news on Hawaii and the latest to possibly legalize sports betting for our friends out west. Right now, it looks like that potential bill could be on life support because just 48 hours after a bill went to the House, there's a companion bill in the Senate that they decided to defer the proposal. It's called Senate Bill 1569 that goes along with this House Bill 1308. Forget the numbers. Here's the bottom line. It was passed with amendments by a vote of 5-0 earlier in February at a consumer protection meeting. They went without dismissing it without hesitation. So as of right now, it would appear nothing happens soon with the state of Hawaii. Maybe in the future we will see, but a lot of opposition here, especially with the Hawaii Department of the Attorney General and other government departments. And so stay tuned. For those of you who live out in Hawaii, no sports betting, at least for the time being. Meanwhile, there's some good news for the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. They finally agreed to mediate lawsuits. Of course, right now the Mountain West upset with the Pac-12. Pac-12 upset with the Mountain West. They said Thursday that they've entered a mediation with Boise State, Colorado State, and Utah State, of course, for leaving the conference. Ongoing lawsuits could lead to some settlements before the sides take their chances in court, but it would appear that they're headed to mediation. As part of the agreement in 2023, the Mountain West included language that called for the Pac-12 to pay a fee of $10 million if a school left the Mountain West with escalators of $500,000. Naturally, conferences don't want to see their teams leaving, and that indeed was the case. Here's the statement, by the way, from the Mountain West, for those of you who are interested, as the ball continues to roll in their favor. The goal is to resolve the parties' dispute through terms mutually agreed by the parties. West Coast Conference agrees to remain confident in their litigation. Needless to say, eventually this will get worked out, and there'll be some payments made to the Mountain West in the future. Okay, some unfortunate news in the NBA as well. Future Hall of Famer Greg Popovich, head coach of the San Antonio Spurs, has won several championships with them, is not going to return to the Spurs this season. He met with the players and said that returning and his NBA future is uncertain. Of course, he's had some health issues dating back to last year. Meanwhile, in the NBA last night, the clock keeps turning to LeBron James's age. It doesn't seem to matter. The Lakers beat the Timberwolves last night. Final score 111-102. LeBron, by the way, last night had one of his best overall games of the season. 33 points for King James, 17 rebounds. Luka had 21 and 13. Lakers keep rolling. Meanwhile, it was the game of the night, as we said. Not only did LeBron James have the big game, but also Steph Curry had his biggest game of the season. 56 points for Steph Curry to go along with 12 three-pointers as the Warriors beat the Magic 121-115. Curry had 12 threes in the game, 22 points in the third quarter. They trailed by 14. They ended up leading by 5. Steve Kerr still in amazement on the future Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean, Raymond just said it was his 26th game with 10 or more threes. So we're spoiled around here. We're used to it, but it never gets old watching. I can tell you that. I think the fans here tonight, even the Magic fans, they know they're witnessing greatest shooter ever and one of the greatest performers ever. It's not just the shots going in; it's just the fluidity, the beauty of his movement and motion, and his audacity, the shots that he's willing to take. He's an incredible performer, and he put on quite a show tonight.
Still witnessing greatness in Golden State as well as Milwaukee. Man, Giannis, certainly when he's at his best, he can help the Bucks beat any team. That was the case last night. They beat the red-hot Denver Nuggets. 121-112 was the final score there. Giannis, 28 points, but had a season-high rebounds with 19 in the game yesterday. Nikola Jokic, of course, had his triple-double, 32 points, 14 rebounds, and 10 assists. Great matchups here of MVPs. And Doc Rivers very cleanly saying after the game, this is a team that when they're on, his team can beat anybody.
Yeah, we just play well, man. But we beat the Clippers, we beat Oklahoma. No matter if it counts or not, we still beat them, and then won this game. So we're not going to let that be taken away from us. It doesn't mean anything except for it's a home game that we needed, and it was a well played game. It was a very physical game, and I was disappointed after the Rockets game because I thought we didn't play. We were the bigger team, and they were more physical, and that bothered me. And tonight, you had two big teams, and I thought we were the more physical team. In the first half, I thought they were the more physical team, and then in the second half, we turned it around.
The much maligned Zion Williamson's got to be feeling pretty good about himself. He's starting to play the best basketball of his career. Triple-double last night. Pelicans beat the Suns. Suns are struggling. 124-116. Zion, 27 points, 10 rebounds, 11 assists. Phoenix was down 18. Seems like every game in the NBA, some team is down 18. They come all the way back, down 20, come all the way back. But in this case, the Pelicans did dominate the fourth quarter. Here is Zion on his big performance.
So we took a step in the right direction. Now it's just being super consistent with it.
What's it like for you personally to get your first career triple-double?
It's dope. But it's funny because there were so many times where I feel like it could have happened, but I never forced the issue on it. But tonight my teammates was like, nah, you got to get it tonight. So I had to thank my coach and my teammates for that.
It's been a fun week of college hoops, including some buzzer beaters. First was Michigan State over Maryland. Michigan returned the favor over Rutgers last night. Final score 84-82. Nimari Burnett had a three-point shot that went in at the bucket, so Michigan, ranked 15th, wins. And as of right now, their record is 22-6 and 14-3 in the Big Ten. So, of course, that puts them in a tie with Michigan State for the conference. It's going to go right down to the final week of the season. Meanwhile, number 5, UConn, the women claim their 5th straight Big East regular season title as they beat Creighton 72-53. Sarah Strong had 22 points and 9 rebounds in this game. And Gino Auriemma, who has had success for decades, continues to and talked about another accomplishment.
In 1985, our goal was to just make the Big East tournament, just to be able to play a game in the Big East tournament. And when we made the Big East tournament that very first year, we celebrated like we had accomplished something really, really significant. And I don't want it to all of a sudden be, well, it's national championship or bust at UConn, that winning regular season championships doesn't matter anymore, because it does matter. And we've always made it matter. It's always been important to us. And it's taken its toll, trust me. All this time, all this. But hey, we put up a whopping 9 points in the fourth quarter. So I haven't lost my touch.
Good stuff from Gino after the game. All right, spring training action set to go here, 105 Eastern in the Grapefruit League. Let's get to the latest in baseball. We'll start off, by the way, with the Cactus League. A couple of teams here, a couple of big injuries. First one is to Zach Neto, shortstop of the Angels. Of course, he was supposed to miss opening day, so it looks like that there's a possibility that he could miss the month of April. He had shoulder surgery at the end of last season. Andrew Benintendi of the White Sox out 4 to 6 weeks with a broken hand. Nico Horner will not travel with the Cubs to Tokyo. Garrett Cole makes his pitching debut in the spring today for the Yankees at 6:30 Eastern. Miles Garrett, not open to a contract extension with the Browns, still asking for a trade. Travis Kelce says he will be back next season. Gilbert McGregor will be back with us next.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
We know the Knicks are talented. They're 37-20. It's not a bad season by any stretch. They're just not being the upper echelon team.
This is the Knicks team right now. They're a very good team. And I'm a Knicks fan. You can't look at there and say, this team can win a championship. They're not good enough. They're not good enough defensively. Are we the New York Knicks or are we the New York Fugazis? Forget about it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the two best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Let's welcome back Gilbert McGregor from Sporting News with us here on NewsWire. Was break down the latest in the National Basketball Association. And I guess Gilbert, going to have to accuse us of too much Lakers talk because that's where we're going to start today, the late night game going in favor of the Lakers. Gilbert, they're playing great basketball, and so, yeah, we got to talk about it. I mean, it feels like LeBron could just play another 10 years if he wanted to, but really the story here is getting Luka more involved in the offense. And definitely playing better defense too, which I think is going to be a surprise to most people. A lot of people thought the Lakers defense with the trade of AD would go the other way.
Absolutely, Craig. And I guess the thing now is this is justified Lakers talk. This team has won 4 games in a row. And as you said, they're playing really good basketball. Big win over the Minnesota Timberwolves last night. And when you talk about LeBron James in year 22, we have to start saying that maybe 40 is the new 30. The oldest player in the NBA, 33 points, 17 rebounds last night. And the buy-in on the defensive end is a big credit to what LeBron James is doing, anchoring that defense. But J.J. Redick getting this team to buy in 1 through 5, everybody who's on the floor. They've had the best defense in the league for the last 6 or 8 weeks now, and that is really where they're getting it done. That's going to be their bread and butter, and especially in the Western Conference where there really isn't a break on any given night. You have to be sound and solid defensively, and the Lakers check that box.
Golden State goes on the road in Orlando, and Steph Curry has one of the best games of anybody that has had in the NBA this season, especially from the three-point stripe. He nailed 12 threes yesterday, Gilbert, 16 of 25 from the field, 22 points in the third, and yes, hit the 50 spot. 56 points for Steph Curry. Certainly we're still watching a future Hall of Famer and greatness on a nightly basis, but it is not. Look, it's not the same Curry that it was 5 years ago where he hit 40 and 40 and 40 and 35. I mean, this was one of those games that reminded me of those vintage years where they won the championship.
Those vintage Curry flurries. And it's funny, we were wondering what Jimmy Butler was going to bring to this team. He didn't even have a big game last night, but I think the new energy has kind of brought a different look to everybody in that locker room. And you're seeing it with Steph Curry. The game he had last night, it was very much a vintage performance. The 12 3-pointers, the showmanship, the 56 points in a game where he and Quentin Post, actually a rookie from Boston College, combined for 74 of the team's 121 points. So they're 7-1 since acquiring Jimmy Butler. Steph Curry looks loose. He looks free. And the Warriors are a hot team right now. And I think that the way they're playing, you don't want to see Steph Curry in a postseason series, especially with a team that have guys like Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, and they're waiting to get Jonathan Kuminga back from injury. They are a scary sight to see in the postseason, and it all starts with Steph Curry, who, by the way, will be 37 in a few weeks. So the old guys are still holding strong.
They are. And you know what? We just mentioned 2 of them here on the show, so that's a good start. Meanwhile, not the start that Anthony Edwards wanted yesterday, was hit for a technical again. So it looks like there's a 1-game suspension coming from him. But, Gilbert, this is, basically a story of still a very young player who's an all-star caliber player without a doubt. The only hope for Minnesota has to be at this point is after this, they kind of got to probably have a conversation because you can't have him missing a playoff game.
Absolutely. To whom much is given, much is required. And this is a guy who's 23 years old, and people are talking about him being the face of the league. He was thrust into being the face of the franchise, and that's a lot of responsibility. But I think he needs to recognize that he's capable of handling that and understand how to handle that. And I think that down the line, we'll be looking back and maybe laughing at the fact that he was going through this early in his career. But it's something that he has to go through and grow through, and it's be for the better of him and the franchise as they continue to move forward and try to win big with him.
All right, so now let's go to tonight's 2 big games. And my gosh, this is a huge one here tonight for the Detroit Pistons. Okay, so is Jokic out tonight? Because Detroit is 1.5-point favorites at home. The total is 237.5. This is the first time, Gilbert, that I see the sports books respecting Detroit finally after that win against the Celtics. My gosh, it does not get any easier tonight. I'm happy that they're finally respecting this, but it does seem odd to me to make Detroit a favorite over Denver. That's all I'm saying here.
Incredible to see, Craig. Just last year, you and I were talking about Detroit maybe having the worst losing streak in NBA history. And this time last year, they had only won 8 games. Tonight, they've won 8 games in a row. They try to make it 9 against this Nuggets team. I'm surprised as well to see that. Now, the Nuggets are on the second end of a back-to-back, had a hard-fought game in Milwaukee last night. But an interesting stat that I pointed out, the Nuggets are actually 10-1 on the second end of back-to-backs this season. So if you buy into that history and think that it's not all due to games they play at home at that altitude, then I would side with the Nuggets tonight. I think this is an opportunity for the Pistons to prove themselves once again, but it's a big test. And the last time these 2 teams played, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. had big games. So Detroit's going to have their hands full.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see the result of this one. Okay, so a potential matchup in the Eastern Conference Finals would be Cleveland at Boston, and this is where the line does seem fair. It's a bucket, Celtics -2.5. I know Jaylen Brown has missed some time. Total 232.5 in one. Is the line representing Brown in or out? I know he's a huge part of what they do.
It feels like this would represent him being in. He and Drew Holiday are both questionable for tonight's game, as well as Luke Cornett, who has a big role off their bench. But it's going to be big, keeping an eye on whether or not Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday will be available for this game. I would expect them to play because this is a opportunity for Boston to make another statement against Cleveland. They've won 2 of their first 3 against the Cavs, but this is a very different Cavs team. They've picked up DeAndre Hunter and Javonte Green, who we talked about, 2 guys who kind of assess the needs for perimeter defense against a team like the Celtics with Tatum and Brown. So I think the injury report is big on this one, but I think the Cavaliers will be very motivated to try to make a statement. They've also won 8 games in a row, and I think they want to prove that they're capable of hanging around with the Celtics and have a chance to beat them tonight.
All right, final thing, Gilbert, before we go. I know that we're going to finally get the news on Joel Embiid coming up soon here. This can't keep lingering. Do you anticipate him playing another game with Philadelphia this season? It seems like very murky reporting here on his injury.
I would think not. All the talk they're talking about is exploring different options, and all of them seem pretty drastic to take care of whatever he's been dealing with this season. And this is a team who's lost 9 games in a row now, and they're probably wanting to focus on the future. If they don't finish in the bottom 6, their draft pick goes to Oklahoma City. So I would expect him to be out for the season and potentially beyond, but hopefully he can get back to playing at some type of All-NBA level once he's healthy again.
Yeah, one of the best players in the NBA. A lot of injuries. Reminds me a lot of Kawhi Leonard from a few years ago, too. All right, Gilbert, thanks for coming to the show. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up again next week. Thanks for coming on.
Sounds good. Have a great weekend.
All right, Gilbert McGregor from Sporting News. Coming up next, we'll check in Indianapolis as they wrap up the scouting combine. And also Scott Farrell has his thoughts on one team in college basketball. You're watching NewsWire on SportsGrid. We've got the SportsGrid sound off up next. Don't go away.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
We know the Knicks are talented. They're 37-20. It's not a bad season by any stretch. They're just not being the upper echelon team.
This is the Knicks team right now. They're a very good team. And I'm a Knicks fan. You can't look at there and say, this team can win a championship. They're not good enough. They're not good enough defensively. Are we the New York Knicks or are we the New York Fugazis? Just forget about it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the 2 best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell coast to coast, only on SportsGrid. The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
And welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. We're going to get into the very latest at the scouting combine and also hear from Scott Farrell on one of the hottest teams in all of college basketball. It's time now for the SportsGrid Sound Off. Yeah, it certainly has been one of the signature seasons for Rick Pitino at St. John's University. They have been a team that's gone from outside the top 25 to inside the top 10, on the verge of basically completing a regular season title. How far they go in the NCAA tournament, well, that's anybody's guess. Let's check in with Coast to Coast and Scott Farrell on the job Rick Pitino has done this season at St. John's.
The best team, like when I saw his team get suffocated by St. John's over the weekend at the Garden, there is no better full court press in America than St. John's. I mean, they are absolutely a blanket. They are your worst nightmare bringing the ball inbounds. I mean, it is unbelievable watching that team handle teams trying to bring the ball up court and inbounds. I mean, St. John's got it down to a science. Rick Pitino, can you imagine, Mike, what his practices are like when he teaches that press? Like the first day of the season, and then every day for hours on it, and he just hammers the press and teaches them how to guard every pass, every player, every spot, every space on the court is covered. It's mastery. It is the stuff of genius. It is no different than Bob Knight's man-on-man defense, which was the greatest man defense in the history of college basketball, bar none.
Good stuff from Farrell coming up 3 o'clock today on Coast to Coast. Meanwhile, it's been a wild ride for the Dallas Cowboys offseason. Mike McCarthy is out. Brian Schottenheimer is in, and so naturally he's at the scouting combine in Indianapolis, has been the head coach for approximately 1 month, and he discussed his time as leading the Dallas Cowboys to whatever the future looks like.
Really busy. You go to sleep at night, you have a pretty good plan of what the next day is going to bring, and you wake up and there's certainly things that you anticipated, but wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, okay, I got to do this. I didn't think about that. So even being in it, David, for 25 years, there's things that pop up that you're just kind of like, wow, I hadn't thought about that. So I'd say the other head coaches have been amazing. They've reached out to me. They've been awesome as sounding boards, but the staffing was probably the most difficult part, but also the most enjoyable part.
I think the Dallas Cowboys have a lot of work ahead of them, and we'll see what happens as they get ready for the NFL draft. Lots of speculation that they need an upgrade on offense. Meanwhile, upgrade on offense and defense has been the situation if you draft Travis Hunter early in the upcoming NFL draft in April. Hunter talked about playing both positions, cornerback and wide receiver, at the next level.
In the NFL, I got my own unique play style. I play both sides of the ball. Not that many people in the NFL have done it. I did some meetings at receiver, did some meetings at DB, so still up in the air. They say nobody has ever done it for real the way I do it, but I tell them that I'm just different. I'm a different person. I mean, nobody have done it, but I feel like I'll put my body through a lot. I do a lot of treatment. People don't get to see that part, what I do for my body to make sure I'm 100% each game, but I feel like I can do it because nobody have done it, and I know I can do it. I did it at college level, which the game is, we rarely get breaks, and it's a lot more breaks in the NFL.
And speaking of offense, there's probably no better tight end coming out of college this season than Penn State's Tyler Warren, virtually unstoppable in college. Can he get that to the next level in the NFL in his rookie season? He talked about the potential of what he could bring to an NFL system.
I'm really, I think I can do a lot of different things. So I'm whatever the offense needs from week to week, and, kind of what they want my role to be is what I'll do. And that might change, from game to game. So I think I'm a guy that can do a lot of different things and, fill a lot of different holes like that.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from the NFL on that topic about what type of positions and roles they want to play?
Honestly, it hasn't been anything too specific about it. Really hasn't, gotten into specifics of where that might be. But I think we're all kind of on the same page. There's a lot of different things you can do with the tight end in general, and then me, being able to do a lot of different things.
I think right now the bottom line is that when you're talking about the Indianapolis Combine, it's been a lot of information coming out this week. But I think that what we've learned is that a lot of the offensive performers are going to be pushed up come draft day in April. Coming up next is for us to dive into the latest in sports betting with Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report. We'll have the update on the state of Hawaii and also update you on the latest with ESPN Bet. You're watching NewsWire on SportsGrid, so stick with us because we'll be back right after the break. Don't go away.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
We know the Knicks are talented. They're 37-20. It's not a bad season by any stretch. They're just not being the upper echelon team.
This is the Knicks team right now. They're a very good team. And I'm a Knicks fan. You can't look at there and say, this team can win a championship. They're not good enough. They're not good enough defensively. Are we the New York Knicks or are we the New York Yankees? Just forget about it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the two best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell coast to coast, only on SportsGrid. The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. I'm Craig Mish. Sam McQuillan is with us from Legal Sports Report as he joins us now. And Sam, welcome back to NewsWire. Thanks for coming on the show here. I guess this is a story that just keeps on percolating here over the last couple of years. This decision of ESPN wanting to get into the sports betting game. And, Sam, it does make sense. I mean, they are the worldwide leader. They do get a lot of eyeballs on their product, and they get a lot of attention, too. But they were very late to the game to get sports betting starting. So I'm not really all that surprised to hear that it's still a struggle for them to get the sports betting content as compared to some of their sports betting product out there. The content, we see it on a daily basis, but the betting product itself, while it may be positive and it may work for everyone, it's just not getting enough eyeballs on that.
Yeah, the takeaway there, Craig, is who is running what. ESPN is in charge of all their sports content. They're the worldwide leader, as they've called themselves. Disney owns them. But when it comes to sports betting, it was basically something they outsourced. You had ESPN and Amazon. Everyone was kind of looking at them for a couple of years when sports betting started, wondering when they would get in the game, when they would potentially partner with somebody. Eventually, ESPN did that when Penn threw about $2 billion in their face to use their name, to use their license to build out their sports book with hopes of utilizing the content that you're talking about, their assets, to get that to attract customers to their platform, and then B, retain them. But almost 2 years later, that really has not been the case. We're still in that wait and see phase. Penn had its earnings call this week, and one of the most notable takeaways from it is this is basically the first time their CEO came out and said, if this isn't working out by year 3, we do have an option to exit this partnership flat out. Penn is under tremendous pressure right now from a proxy battle, which is around their online sports betting mishaps, for lack of a better word. They lost about $850 million on the Barstool Sports acquisition, which was a failure. They couldn't figure out how to grow that brand. They ended up selling it back to the founder for $1, which, everyone kind of laughed about in the headlines, only to move on to ESPN to give them about $2 billion over the next 10 years. But there is that 3-year opt-out clause that CEO Jay Snowden talked about, saying basically, if this online sports betting thing isn't working, we can exit it. That's kind of a lever for us to try to figure out how to save money. They lost about $500 million last year from the ESPN bet venture. They're still very much hoping to hit a profitable quarter by the end of this year, with 2026 being when they're hoping for full profitability, which we've seen some of these other sports books do. But time is kind of running out. They're getting a lot more investor pressure. We're not really seeing these things they've talked about, the integrations across ESPN's assets, being able to utilize the user base they have in so many states with fantasy football. We haven't seen that really come to fruition in terms of being a benefit for the product yet. They're still focused on that roadmap and unveiling stuff. They've got a plan for March Madness. The popular ESPN bracket tournament app is out there. They're going to try to give people betting access and content and offers through all those ESPN assets. But just because it's taken so much time, you're now seeing the CEO acknowledge that maybe, we could get out of this after year 3. So that's a big turn from where they've been in terms of we're going to keep spending money, keep trying. They're still going to try to do that, but now they're kind of putting it on the table that, it is realistic that we could just leave this totally. And they've only had about 3% of the market, which is, compared to DraftKings and FanDuel is about 75% between both of them. So the numbers are not quite matching up with what they've poured in so far.
Yeah, I think it's very fascinating to see how this is going to work out here, because they made a very big commitment after this whole Penn Gaming thing sort of fell apart there with DraftKings and everything else. Okay, so now let's get to Rush Street Interactive. Let's not end our week here, Sam, on a sour note. Let's get to a good note. This is a nice company that has continued to grow here in 2024. Tell us more.
Yeah, Rush Street Interactive, they own Bet Rivers, which has been kind of regarded as one of those betting brands, like an ESPN Bet, that hasn't really made a big inroads competing with the tops. So people have kind of been surprised that they've been around for so long, but they actually had their best year ever by every metric when they reported Q4 earnings, just last week. So they had active users up about 28%. Users are spending $346 a month, which is also up. They've been able to kind of make money being a smaller brand. We've heard some CEOs in the past at big companies talk about there being a place for these smaller operators to exist kind of as long as they know their limits. They don't try to go in every state. They don't try to issue crazy promos. So they've done a good job kind of surviving there. Meanwhile, they see tax increases that are going to hit the bigger competitors as something that might benefit them because of their smaller size, smaller scale. They don't plan to launch sports betting in any states that don't have iGaming, which at the end of the day is their end game. So they're really focused on ramping all that stuff up right now while letting kind of the other companies compete for a top spot. And it's turning out to work out for them so far in a smaller kind of less scaled way. So we'll see if they can continue this in 2025. They're a bigger company in terms of global presence, but so far in the US, they've done a solid job kind of staying in that 2 to 3 tier while not trying to expand too fast.
So earlier in the week, we had a positive story, Sam, on the state of Hawaii about the potential of sports betting. My contention with this, Sam, is, kind of like here in Florida, I find it hard to believe that state, with the amount of people that they have vacationing there, are going to want any money going to anything else except for that. And it seems to me that that's what's happening here, is that there was a push initially from the House to get a bill going here, but the Senate seems to be walking that back a little bit. Is there any reason to be optimistic or pessimistic based on this latest piece of news?
Yeah, I think you have to go in with measured optimism, knowing the limits, knowing how hard it's been to advance any gaming bill in Hawaii. They're one of those states that don't have, really any gaming industry at all, any lottery. So it's anytime you're going to talk about legalizing online sports betting, that's a big change. But it's funny to talk about year end in picture. Already the end of the year is kind of coming to mind of which states are going to be able to do it. Hawaii has this deadline next week, and this bill advanced a committee this week, which puts it in position to be voted on, though a similar bill on the Senate floor did not advance. So essentially what happens now is the House goes to this bill with possible changes they believe the Senate didn't like about the version that it voted on in the Senate. When it progressed through the House committee, some members had reservations as well. So there could be more changes in store, some bargaining chips put on the table to kind of get this deal done. One of them we've seen talked about is the tax rate. Initially, it was a 10% proposal, but the sponsor actually took that out before it hit the floor to leave that open. If the Senate believes it should be taxed more, it's an easier thing to do that way. So we're kind of seeing them make some reservations, some possible concessions to maybe get over the finish line. But if you're going to be super optimistic, I would not hold your breath here. Hawaii has been one of those states that's taken a long time. Texas, Minnesota, probably off the board for this year. Hawaii still very much a possibility, but again, there's a lot of politics behind the scenes they have to work out, and then obviously you have the deadline coming up next week. always a gambling bill like this could fall victim to just not being a priority and them having to get other stuff done during the session. But it's still very much a possibility compared to the other states. It's just not looking like a sure thing by any means.
Yeah, I mean, Sam, I guess we could close out with this. You know, we're about to exit the first quarter here, believe it or not already, of 2025. It does feel to me like we may go for the first time a full year without a new state being legalized. We know Missouri did. They still, have to get their ducks in a row here and start up in June. But, of all the states that we talk about, and, certainly, California does not seem in play. Texas seems like a ways away. Now we have Hawaii going the other way. Minnesota can't get going. I mean, do we have a better chance of I hate to say, a repeal of a state having sports betting than actually anything legalized this year?
Yeah, you always got to take that with a reservation. There's only 12 states left that are going to legalize sports betting. At some point, you're going to run out of states unless we take over more. But at this point, you're saying, there's a lot of stagnation. It'll be really interesting to see how that impacts the industry itself when they've had all these launches to look forward to, all these promos to put out, commercials, flood a new market, and sell their base on growing their share that way. It'll be interesting to see if indeed we do have no new states legalizing sports betting this year. It would be the first time since the passport repeal. So definitely a new kind of year for us.
All right, Sam. Well, we'll keep an eye on it and check you out over at LegalSportsReport.com. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yep. Thanks so much, Craig.
All right. Coming up next, our resident expert on ratings is Simon Applebaum from the podcast Tomorrow Will Be Televised. How many people watch the Four Nations hockey tournament? Play next.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
We know the Knicks are talented. They're 37-20. It's not a bad season by any stretch. They're just not beating the upper echelon team.
This is the Knicks team right now. They're a very good team. And I'm a Knicks fan. You can't look at there and say, this team can win a championship. They're not good enough. They're not good enough defensively. Are we the New York Knicks or are we the New York Fugazis? Just forget about it.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the two best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell coast to coast, only on SportsGrid. The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. We got Simon Applebaum for the podcast Tomorrow Will Be Televised. We'll go over the latest in everything happening in the world of sports, and television, and ratings as well. Simon, welcome back to the show. What a huge hit it was last week watching the Four Nations tournament. Certainly, I think that this is going to open up the eyes, not just for the NHL, Simon, but I think for the other sports too, like the NBA trying to get that midseason tournament going. Is there something going to happen maybe for Major League Baseball as well? I think so. What is your take on the ratings for how many people were watching this? And do you think that this is going to set the precedent for mid-season tournaments in the future?
I think it will, Craig, and great to be back with you. More than 9 million people watched that final game last Thursday between Canada and the U.S. on ESPN. Boy, did ESPN need big news, given what is going on internally. We'll talk about that over the past week with Major League Baseball, with Formula One, and other stuff, too. I think this proved a couple of things. Number one, you can't have an alternative to an all-star game by a major league. This Four Nations thing worked out. It had great storylines. Obviously, the whole situation with Canada and the U.S., and given the geopolitical situation with the tariffs by President Trump and so forth, I think also played in too. Plus, they had the Olympic situation of USA-Russia, the sort of do you believe in miracles kind of storyline as well. I think it all played into the big turnout that they had. Will this impact, I think, the regular season, the Stanley Cup ratings? No. However, I think it is going to impact the possibility of this Four Nations tournament becoming, either an every year or an every other year effect in terms of trying to get the hockey powers of the world together in this kind of fashion. So, bravo. And it was well, by the way, publicized by ESPN. And I thought Sean McDonough did a great job on the play-by-play.
Yeah, and look, I think, Simon, to follow up on this, why was the NHL to get this right? I think of all of the major sports, the NBA, they do their midseason tournament. Honestly, I don't think anybody even remembers who wins this thing. But I think a lot of folks are going to go back and remember what happened here. Reminds me a little bit of baseball's World Baseball Classic. Do you think it's more about representing the countries, and maybe that's the direction that this needs to go?
I think so. The thing about the NHL is, rather than try to tinker with the All-Star game, as the NFL has been doing with the Pro Bowl the last couple of years, and then the NBA, which was a fiasco, as we said last week, what the NHL decided to do was just scrap the All-Star game and do something totally different. Do something from scratch. Do something that will be out of the box. And this certainly was a novelty. This idea of having the top four nations that do hockey represented, USA, Canada, Sweden, etc., was a great, great deal. And luckily, they had enough players from each country involved, including some of the big players involved in this tournament. And I think if it was done, let's say, on an every other year basis or every 3 years basis, it would work. Every year, I'm not sure. But every other year, I think it's got a great chance to work. And this might be, there's already talk that the NBA might be looking at a USA versus the other basketball powers of the world as early as next year.
All right, so finally, Simon, we got some good news with this whole MSG fight with Optimum and New England Sports Network. And so they've been able to work this thing out. Honestly, Simon, how could MSG not get things worked out? I mean, this is a lifeline, I think, that they were thrown here. But good news that folks can now watch the games there.
Yes, Craig. After 2 months of the blackout, Optimum's systems here in the New York metro area are finally putting MSG back on track. And they needed this. Really, the New York metro area is MSG Network's lifeline as a regional power. They needed to get this deal done. If not, there was talk about going bankrupt. So good for everybody that they were able to work a deal out that serves everybody. Now, in terms of New England Sports Network, they're doing something that maybe MSG Network should be looking at, which is they have now set up a national network, a national ad-supported network called NESN Nation, which is basically the NESN programming currently available in the Boston, New England metro area, along with other original programming as well. I think a lot of regional sports networks are going to be looking at this to see whether or not they will set up similar channels that are nationwide appeal. At one point, when Mike Francesa was doing his WFAN program simulcast on the YES Network, he would always say that it's available across the country on the YES Network. So you might see YES, you might see SNY, you might see regional sports networks that have big teams like the New York Yankees or the Dallas Cowboys or the Los Angeles Lakers try the idea of stretching it out to be a national network. A, you get national ad support. B, you also get fans around the country who see their teams as their favorites.
All right. Now let's get to the big news in Major League Baseball. And it seems like this is all coming to a head in a few years, Simon. Where Major League Baseball wants to get their rights fees figured out, and you can understand it because it's just been all over the map the last few years. You have, these companies dropping off and them going independent, Major League Baseball taking it over. And so ESPN, that's been a staple of Major League Baseball and Sunday Night Baseball and Home Run Derby for so many years, I guess they've come to the conclusion that ESPN is no longer willing to pay the rights fee that Major League Baseball wants. There is some discussion that maybe this could continue and be worked back into some sort of different financial form. But at least for the time being, if someone else is willing to step up and pay, ESPN could lose baseball entirely.
It could. And the thing is that for the last couple of years, the relationship between between Major League Baseball and ESPN has been going south and soured over that time. Remember when ESPN started, they would have not just Sunday Night Baseball, they had baseball on other nights, they had Baseball Tonight, their nightly wrap-up show, 7 days a week, plus Home Run Derby, and then later on the wild card playoffs. And the problem is that over the years, that has declined. That level of commitment to baseball and ESPN has gone downhill. Now it's just Sunday Night Baseball, it's the wild card playoff round, and it's Home Run Derby. Plus no Baseball Tonight, except for Sunday nights. And I think that soured both MLB and ESPN to the point where ESPN just said, that's it, I'm not paying as much for a little baseball schedule that we used to do, so we're out of here. The question is, who's MLB going to replace us with? Could it be more games on MLB Network? Could it be going after, let's say, Fox to maybe do Friday night games as along with Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening games? Or could we see some new players? There's talk that Amazon might be interested in the Sunday Night Baseball deal. There's talk that Netflix might either do Home Run Derby or the Wild Card round or both. And keep in mind two other possibilities. The CW, because they have the Sunday night schedule that they could put Sunday Night Baseball in. And how about Roku, which already has the Sunday afternoon games that they pulled off from Peacock last year and coming back in a few weeks. They could have you could see them doing a Sunday afternoon and a Sunday night doubleheader. Don't forget, Roku's become a major sports player with the X Games, with Bassmaster, with all sorts of things that they've done in the last couple of months. So Roku and the CW could be surprise players here.
All right, great stuff, Simon. As always, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
You too, Craig. Enjoy.
All right, coming up next, we are an hour away from the debut of a new position for Jose Altuve. That's right, Grapefruit League action of Altuve playing somewhere else other than second base. Would you believe a historical golf round again? Yesterday was a big one, but another player had a big one too. We'll tell you who.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whoever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
You know the Knicks are talented. They're 37-20. It's not a bad season by any stretch. They're just not beating the upper echelon team.
This is the Knicks team right now. They're a very good team. And I'm a Knicks fan. You can't look at there and say, this team can win a championship. They're not good enough. They're not good enough defensively. Are we the New York Knicks or are we the New York Fugazis? Just forget about it.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the two best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell coast to coast, only on SportsGrid. The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. We'll get into the very latest with some last licks. We're an hour away from the Altuve debut in the outfield. How about another golfer, not on the PGA Tour, by the way, with a historic day. And unfortunately, one of my favorite players in college football is getting sued. Time now for some last licks. Oh, say this ain't so. I read this story online. I mean, so sad here, if it's true. So, Cam Scatterbo, who had one of the best games from a fullback running back that I've ever seen in college football, fan favorite from Arizona State entering the NFL draft, is being sued by a former teammate of his. This is a true story. Apparently, the two of them were getting ready to go to a practice, and they were riding a golf cart. And the teammate, or I guess now ex-teammate of Scatterbo, alleges that Scatterbo, who seems like a fun guy, was jumping up and down on the golf cart, and his buddy, ex-teammate, fell off the golf cart and suffered serious injuries. And now he's looking for a payday. Now, look, I'm not here to judge, okay? I'm just here to tell you the story. But this is a bummer, man. This is a bummer to see this. And you kind of have to wonder here a little bit with the NIL deal. Like, would this teammate be able to sue Cam Scatterbo if he didn't get NIL money and he wasn't getting paid like college football players are? I have no idea. But as he enters the NFL draft, he's certainly headed for a big payday. And I'm not talking about a first-round pick payday or anything like that. But Scatterbo does stand to make millions of dollars in the National Football League. And it's sort of sad to see that his former teammate is doing this. But again, we don't know the story. Did it happen or not? This is what's being alleged. We'll just have to stay tuned and update you and see which way this lawsuit ends up going. Maybe there'll be a settlement. Maybe Scatterbo will come out and say this never happened. We have no idea. Here's what we do know. Who's leading off today in the Grapefruit League for the Houston Astros? It's Jose Altuve. That's not a surprise. Here is what the surprise of the offseason was. Remember when they said that they would bring back Alex Bregman? Potentially. And if so, that Houston would move maybe him to second base and move Jose Altuve to the outfield. They didn't get Alex Bregman, but they're still moving Altuve to left field. He's been taking practice reps all week long, and he's in the starting lineup today for the first time in his career, basically since he was a rookie, I think, back 15 years ago in minor league camp as an outfielder. And he's going to play left field, it looks like, for the Astros this season. Now, again, this is subject to change. It is spring training. A lot of things can change between now and opening day. But this will be one of the main focuses, I think, in Grapefruit League action today, to see him take his first fly ball. I know our producer, Frank, does not like Altuve with the whole cheating stuff. I get it. But say what you want, Altuve is going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. And he'll be the left fielder for the Astros this coming season. All right, have you ever heard the name Dale Whitnell? Me? Never heard of him. Never heard of Dale Whitnell. Well, apparently he's a player on the DP World Tour. This is the alternative tour to the PGA Tour. So, it's not the minor leagues. I don't know if that's fair to say. But he's playing on the DP World Tour, not Live Golf. So Dale Whitnell yesterday played a round of golf just like anybody else does. But unlike you or unlike me, he had a hole-in-one. Congratulations. So now you're saying, like, Craig, why would you end the show with a hole-in-one? He had two in the same round yesterday. Oh, my gosh. Are you serious? Like, hole-in-ones, like, that's like a life-changing moment. This guy did it twice in the same round. Congratulations, man. Dale Whitnell, you made our show here on NewsWire. End of the show. Congrats to you, man. Good job. All right, that will do it for our show today. As a reminder, maybe Smiley will talk about this coming up next. He's coming your way at 12 o'clock Eastern. That's followed by Pharrell Coast to Coast, 3 o'clock Eastern. And then we got Game Time Decisions, in-game live game day. We've got all sports going on right now, folks. We've got spring training action, NHL, NBA, college basketball, sports rage tonight. And Gabe, he's got you covered with all of the action leading you right up until this big weekend of college hoops. We're getting ready for conference tournaments coming up. The month of March begins tomorrow here on SportsGrid, so stay tuned to that as well. Thanks again to Gilbert McGregor for coming on the show, and thanks to Simon Applebaum as well as Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report. A great week of shows from our director and producer, our director Luke, our producer Frank. And just a reminder, you can always download the SportsGrid app by taking out your phone and scanning this QR code. It'll give you the weekend programming schedule, which includes me. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning talking fantasy baseball with George Kurtz right here on Fantasy Sports Today. And then Joe Pisapia and Matt Stryker have you Sunday morning. For those of you who are getting ready for baseball season, you may want to stay tuned for that show. All right, so fantasy baseball is not your thing. I understand. But hopefully this show is. And if that's the case, I'll see you Monday morning for our next edition of NewsWire. That is at 11 a.m. Eastern, as we close in on March Madness and the NCAA tournament. So enjoy your weekend out there wherever you are. Thanks for tuning into our show all week long. See you next week.